Hello, it's me. In this video I chose the game between Daniil Dubov and Hikaru Nakamura from Lindores Abbey online tournament from the last year. This was the Armageddon game from the final, and he chose a very unusual opening. He chose Vienna, not so often played. And here black has two main options, I would say, knight c6 or knight f6. On knight f6 he's ready to play d5 early on. If white goes bishop c4 here, then black can even take on e4, and white is not forced to capture. He can go queen h5, and after knight d6, then if white takes, then queen e7 just leads to some symmetrical positions. But also there's a very nice line here after bishop b3. Is it knight c6 and knight b5, something like that. g6, queen f3, and on f5 to go queen d5, and now queen e7. And now white takes the exchange by like this, and white is still underdeveloped. Eventually this knight on a8 will be lost. Black plays b6, bishop b7, and tries to exploit this underdevelopment of white. Let's go back to the game. Hikaru chose knight c6, and now Dubov plays g3. He is going for the fianchetto variation, and bishop c5 now, trying to control the d4 square, bishop g2, and now knight f6. He's slowly trying to push the d5 at some point. But in this case, he has to spend 2 tempi to play d6 at one point, to support with bishop e6, and then to push d5, which is in my opinion slightly worse than in, let's say, this case. If white plays g3 in this case, then you can play d5 immediately, and I would say that black is doing fine. But okay, let's go back to the game. So we have knight e2, d6, and now d3 first. Now a6, trying to make space for the bishop in case knight a4 happens, so black doesn't lose the bishop pair. Now white castles and bishop e6. He brings the last piece into the play, and now h3. The point of this move is that if you go king h1, now black can bother you with knight g4. White has to go queen e1, and then he has to be careful about knight b4 as well. And that's maybe something that wasn't so attractive to Daniil. So he wanted to first secure g4 square from some entries like knight g4, and then to play king h1 or king h2, and then to push f4. And here Nakamura plays h6, trying to stop the pinning by bishop g5, but I would say that here d5 was also very good. After bishop g5 and d4, now the most principled would be just to go knight d5. But even then, black can go back to e7. After this, black will eventually kick the bishop away with h6, and then maybe even expand on the king side and castle on the queen side. He plays h6 here, now king h2, preparing f4. Now Hikaru plays d5, but now it gets really unpleasant, because now after taking f4, the threat might be f5 on the next move, or just knight e4 and f5, challenging this bishop on e6, moving it to a more passive square. Black's position is already looking concerning. For example, if he takes on c3 now, there is bc, and the point is, if you take on f4 now, you can take with the knight. The threat is d4, d5, trying to fork the bishop and the knight. So here Hikaru took on f4, but now there is a very nice move here. Dubov plays bishop d5 first, and now Hikaru plays bishop d5. If he took on g3, that still doesn't solve all the problems, because after knight g3, bishop d5, white has queen h5. And look at this, the bishop on c5 hangs. If you do this to defend the bishop on d5, then white just takes, and after all this, rook f5 is coming. And even if you defend with the rook, now there is c4 and black is losing a piece. He will have 2 pawns for a piece with some compensation. I think something like this would happen. White's king still has some issues, but I think white is better here. But instead he takes immediately. After this, now the bishop, if bishop goes here, then you take and go queen h5, taking the bishop. So the bishop cannot move, and it's under attack, so black has to play something like this. And now Dubov plays queen h5. I think it was more precise just to go for taking, and queen h5 immediately. Because now queen f7 is a threat, queen d5 is a threat, and also bishop is under some x-ray attack. If the knight moves, then queen c5. But I think this doesn't make much difference. Queen h5 is also very good. And after c6, he took like this. He could take even like this. Take on f7. It was also a possible option, because after this there is knight f6, and after king f8, queen h6, and a checkmate. He chose this, and if knight d5, then knight e6 again works. So after cd, again knight e6, queen d6, and he took on g7, king d7, and rook f7. White is 2 pawns up, black's king is also terrible. Hikaru plays rook a8, and now bishop f4. Where does the queen go? If the queen goes to c6, then there is this check, take the rook on the next move. Black is here forced to give up the queen. He took on f7, and his hope is that after white takes, he has this check, which was played in the game. King h1, bishop d6, and now rook e1. White has a material advantage, positional advantage. Black's king is just hopeless in the center. Now white just has to be careful not to blunder something. Because you know, two rooks are always quite tricky to handle. Now we have a check on g4, king c6, and now knight e6. Knight has to improve its position. Rook f6, and now knight d4, king b6. And white wants to exchange one pair of rooks, which is understandable. Rook f1, and now king g2. So now there is no rook g6 to use the weakness on g3, because you can just take it and take the rook. So now he plays knight c6. Daniil takes bc and c3 now. He also tries to limit the dark square bishop by playing c3, by putting all the pawns on the dark squares. Rook f5, trying to get to rook g5 or h5, somehow to open up the white's king. Now b4, rook g5 doesn't work because of this, and losing the rook. He plays king b7, trying to avoid any checks on d4, but he has this check. Now if the king goes to b6, that's also the point of b4. a4 would be a move, and black's king is quite compromised here. So he plays this, but he loses the pawn. Bishop c7, and now queen e3 back. White just needs to be solid now, he will finish the game. Bishop b6, and now d4. The bishop's scope is very limited, and there's not much that Hikaru can do here. Bishop c7, and now the pawns start marching. h4, a5, and now just a3. We have a couple of more moves, and now white is ready to open up the position on the queen side by pushing b5 next. Rook f6 back, and now he takes. If rook takes, then queen b5 check, and the d5 pawn also gets lost. So at this point it doesn't matter what black does, it's hopelessly lost. Queen e8, now white wants to go rook e7 to exchange pair of rooks. Rook f8, and now rook e7. Bishop c7, and after queen b5 check, if he goes back to c8, there is also queen c5 as an option, and he will give a checkmate very soon. So he went to b6 with the rook, but there is a nice tactical blow. If you want, you can pause the video here and find the solution. Of course, you can take on d5 as well, collecting all the pawns of black, but there is one simple way to finish it on the spot, and that's rook c7. And in this position, Hikaru Nakamura resigned, because after king c7, there is queen c5, double attack on the rook and the king. Thank you so much for watching this, have a nice day, and bye bye.